waking up on the second day of Christmas, 6 a.m, working on this thesis. I hated every second. So even in our main lessons, we had ear training classes because the ear training taught at our university was too easy. If you just do these 3 things, I would say it's like 80% of singing. He told me, yeah, you got 15 out of 15 points, but that's not even close enough. What you have to be able to do. Piano reductions are not actually written for piano. So, I'm done. 2 weeks ago, I finished my bachelor's degree in conducting. In this video, I want to give you a brief overview of how my studies looked like and what I had to do. In particular, I want to talk about my final exam because I think that's probably the most interesting part. Quite similar to all the other instruments when you study conducting, the main lessons are the most important things and you spend the most time preparing for them. In my case, this means playing a lot of piano. Like a lot. The main lessons themselves have multiple different parts. Most of the time, we had group lessons. One person conducted, the teacher gave feedback and the other people played on pianos, either from a score if it was a symphony or a piano reduction if it was an opera. Now the other 2 parts, I basically mentioned them already. The first one is playing piano reductions from operas while also singing simultaneously. This is quite difficult because very often you will have very hard things to play and to sing at the same time, and it's very, very hard. For example, playing B major while singing A flat sounds dissonant, is dissonant, but if you have perfect intonation, it does sound quite good. That's something that I learned in instrumentation, something I will talk about later. You basically cannot create a dissonance between the voice and any other instruments. It doesn't work. 2 instruments, you can create a dissonance very easy, but between an instrument and a voice, nearly impossible. The third ingredient of the main lessons is score reading. Score reading, as the name says, is you read a score and you also play it on the piano. I mentioned we had to play a lot of piano. So basically the left hand plays the harmonies, the right hand plays the melody. This is a very simplified version. Sometimes and very often it does not work like this, but in general this works quite well. If you're interested in learning more about score reading, I made a complete video just about how to play a score on a piano, where I went over all the beginner steps you have to take. I think it's a great video, especially because there are not very much tutorials on score reading, pretty much none here on YouTube, so you might want to check it out. I'm also going to put the link in the description for the video so you can check it out after this video if you want to. One thing I want to mention about score reading: you do not have to sound like a pianist and you do not want to recreate the sound of a piano. You do want to recreate the sound of an orchestra. So sometimes this also can mean using very much pedal, reading 12 instruments at the same time. Sounds pretty difficult, and I can tell you it is very difficult. You can learn it. I don't even think you need to be particularly smart. You just need time. It took me like 3 to 4 years to get decently good. But I think if you do everything right, if you watch the video, link in the description, you will become decent in maybe 2 years. There were 2 final exams. One was a 30-minute rehearsal with an orchestra and the other one was score reading / piano reductions. In the latter one I had to prepare 2 scores and 2 piano reductions. I chose the second act from the Rosenkavalier, just a small part of it, the end of Debussy, Pélier's et Mélisande. These were the piano reductions, and then the scores, the beginning of the second suite of Ravel's Daphnis et Chloé. Beautiful piece, absolutely love it. And then from Wagner's Parsifal, Karfreitagszauber, very difficult to play, so I was glad that my teacher skipped it in the examen. One thing I haven't mentioned yet, you also had to sight read scores and piano reductions. So if you thought preparing these 2 was difficult, well, it's even getting worse. The only good thing, the teachers and the people in the jury, they know that it's very difficult and that's normal that you can't hit every note. I certainly didn't. If I had to guess, maybe 50%. Probably less. So it's normal that you play a lot of mistakes, that when you sing it doesn't work very well. You can help yourself with the right hand and the piano and play the melody a bit. So funny enough, my bachelor's audition was so much more difficult, the sight reading of scores and piano reductions, compared to my master's entry audition and to my bachelor's examen. That was quite funny. I had to play Dvorak's 9th Symphony, second movement. I don't think I played any right harmony. Like seriously, I just messed everything up. You wouldn't believe how bad I played it, and I still got in. Now to the orchestra rehearsal. We were able to choose one piece by ourselves. The other one we got 2 weeks before the rehearsal. I chose from Ravel's Valse Noble et Sentimentale, number 2 and 3, and the other piece I had to play was the beginning of Beethoven's Egmont Overture. That was quite good because the other candidates, in my opinion, got way worse of pieces, so I was very happy with that. The main lessons were definitely the modules where I learned the most. I have to say I had one other teacher, Christian, who taught me very much, an assistant of our professor. So I'm very grateful to have also lessons with him. Especially learning the basics of piano reductions. It was insanely helpful to work with Christian. Besides the main conducting lessons, you also had to have a main instrument. In my case, this was the flute because I also studied flute before and I finished my flute studies while studying conducting, so I didn't have to do them again. Technically, you have 8 semesters, so throughout the whole bachelor's degree. These are also typically the lessons where you learn the most. For every person whose main instrument was not the piano, you also did get 4 semesters worth of piano lessons. You can probably guess why. Most other students who do not study conducting also do have 4 semesters of piano lessons, even if they do not have to play, not even close as good as conducting students. I guess it's obvious why we had piano lessons, because it's such a huge part of learning conducting. The level of difficulty playing a piano reduction from Strauss is so high, even if you shorten the piano reduction, because you do not have to play everything. It's still so difficult, and it's definitely advantageous to have a, let's say, decent technique. Something that I learned quite late: piano reductions are not actually written for piano. They are written so that you can basically see in one system, like one treble clef, one bass clef, what the orchestra would typically play. Technically you can play it, but there are some pieces like the beginning of the Rosenkavalier first act. I don't know if it's even possible to play everything because it's so difficult. So many octave with 6 thirds, like such an insane tempo. Sometimes there are even 3 systems where they just put everything in there and the conductor itself had to figure out what they wanted to play of it. So it's more an abstract form of a smaller score, and in the end you have to figure out what you want to play of it and what is most important for the singers. I had 4 semesters mandatory singing lessons. What can I tell you about it? There are just 3 very important things. First of all, breathe in properly. Second, when you sing, open your mouth very wide. And 3, try to always sing with a certain character or an emotion. If you just do these 3 things, I would say it's like 80% of singing. Please do not judge me for that statement. Besides singing lessons, we also had to sing 4 semesters in the choir. Very much fun. We had some great pieces like the Christmas Oratorio or Mendelssohn's Lobgesang, one of the only pieces that can actually bring me to tears. Such a great music piece. And I have some great memories of these concerts. And the third part of the voice is Sprecherziehung, something like speaking education or more like pronunciation. We learned how to pronounce vowels, vocals, and so on, so that we can teach singers when they're doing something wrong. First lesson with my teacher, we talked for like 5 minutes and she was like deconstructing the way how I spoke. That was quite fun. For example, she taught me where I had to put my tongue and that I couldn't pronounce the difference between the German h and sh. Yeah, that was quite amusing. Because a lot of operas are in Italian, we also had Italian lessons. I don't speak any of it. I know some words, but the main thing we learned was pronunciation, so if you would sight read something, you would not have to go to Google Translator and listen to it, you could just sight read it. The German translation was always underneath, so that made learning Italian operas way faster. Harmony class. Loved it back then, until I found out that it actually did not help us to compose music. We just learned the theory that no composer was using to compose. So a little disappointing, but I still got a great overview of harmony and a good understanding of it. Counterpoint was quite similar what we learned, had no real application, and most of it I already forgot again. Music history, quite boring. I'm not the history guy, I do not have such a great long-term memory, so I also do forget quite fast, so I barely remember anything. Music analysis was quite cool. I had some different modules, some about early 20th century songs, orchestra songs, some about Schubert string quartets, and I did learn a lot, especially from the huge variety of different analysis classes I took. Musical form, did forgot a lot of it again, but I can tell you, try to find patterns, try to find repetition. Stuff like A, B, A or A, B, A are extremely common, and if you look for them, you will be able to find them. What does it bring you? For example, there's one rule in music that if something gets repeated the second time, you just play it differently, and if you directly see the form and you see, okay, there's a repetition, you can purposely play it different the second time. And it's not that it's just less boring, it also feels like something changed. There's some progress, and that's always what music also is. You start somewhere and in the end, the listener has to be changed in some way whatsoever. Here's a fun story. When I did my entry audition for conducting, I got 15 out of 15 points in my ear training exam. First lesson with my teacher back then. I knew him already, but that was the official first lesson. He told me, yeah, you got 15 out of 15 points, but that's not even close enough what you have to be able to do. So even in our main lessons, we had ear training classes because the ear training taught at our university was too easy. And something else that is quite fun. My teacher still tells everyone else when they meet other teachers, yeah, when Carl started with me, like his ear training was so bad. And that's not really true. I mean, it was bad, but at that time I was still, say, like in the top 20, top 10% of music students at our university, so I was not bad at all. Still, if you give me even some basic chord progression, I do quite struggle figuring them out. So compared to people who are very good at this, I'm not even a musician in their eyes probably. I'm not even on the chart. I definitely recognize that there's like way more that I could do in ear training. So I accept the defeat. There was one lecture on new music, one lecture on old music. Both not my style, both not very entertaining. Then there were practical lessons in old music and new music, so basically chamber music. What I did very much enjoy was learning how to play the cembalo. I did not learn much, just like the very basics of how you can change sound color, how you have to play with the second row, some basic thorough bass, how you can break the chords that it sounds in a baroque manner. That was actually quite fun. Instrumentation is the art of arranging a music piece for an ensemble, whether it's an existing one or a complete new piece. Very interesting module, very much enjoyed it, loved the teacher, pretty cool guy. But it's very hard to explain exactly or to give you some examples for instrumentation rules because I don't know any particular rule, just maybe that if you put the melody in the first violin, you're probably doing something right. But here's something that I find interesting. If you look at piano keys, the keys just represent different pitches. The more to the right, the higher the note. The more to the left, the lower the note. Now, if you count up all the pieces played, for example, in a symphony and look for the average notes where they're played and if they are more low, if they're more in the middle, if they're more high, you will probably find a pattern that most of the instruments play somewhere in the middle. There are a few low instruments and a few high instruments. I find that interesting because that means that all octaves are not equally balanced. There's a clear difference between how many instruments play in the middle, how many high and how many low. And I'm pretty sure if you would equally balance this out, so there would be an equal amount of low, middle and high instruments playing at the same time, it would sound terrible. My guess is that because most composers wrote like this, there's probably a certain innate quality to orchestrate to let an orchestra play exactly like this. Why? I don't know. Another interesting thing that most people do not think about purposely is what octave they play, in what inversion and what notes of a chord are played how often in the given chord. If you just change one of these parameters, the sound, the quality of the sound, or just the feeling of what wants to be expressed changes completely. So if you play something here in this range with a lot of instruments, every note is at least twice in the chord. It sounds completely different than if you would play something in a very high register, few instruments, and each note is probably just once or twice in the chord, or at least not as often. What I want to say, a full chord that is quite low or in the middle to low sounds very different than a very high chord with very few instruments. I didn't have much time when I wrote my bachelor's thesis, so I wrote it over the Christmas break in the semester. In 2.5 weeks, I just wrote the full first draft. I remember quite clear waking up on the second day of Christmas at 6 a.m. working on this thesis. I hated every second. I didn't enjoy doing it, but I did learn quite a lot, so I do not regret having written it. Actually, I'm pretty grateful for what I learned. There were some other modules like Feldenkrais, a form of bodywork, career advice, some optional stuff where you could just basically choose randomly what you wanted to do, and one child concert that we had to organize with a group of people and a professor together. But that's basically it. That's everything that I had to do to get my bachelor's degree in conducting. If you want to learn more about score reading, you should check out this video. It's probably the best one on this topic on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and we see each other in the next one.